All right, guys, welcome to another episode. I'm very, very excited and happy to have you on, Yair. I will briefly introduce you. Yair is a serial entrepreneur. In his previous life, I would say in Web 2, he co-founded SuperSmart, the world's first supermarket with no cashiers, even prior to Amazon Go, which processed billions of dollars for its customers since 2014 till this day. Prior to that, you co-founded Neolithics, Octopi, Shout Group, and many other ventures. And what was interesting to me is among all these great ventures is that they're in quite different verticals, I would say, like from machine learning and AI to physical businesses and search engines for influencer and brands online. I have a lot of questions for that, but we will keep them for the second part of the episode. Let's talk about yourself. So give us briefly a context about your journey in Web3 and how you came to found Lava Network.
Yeah, thank you, Neil, for that. I'm super excited to be here. Always like to expand more about my personal journey. Who are the mentors, who are the key people that brought me here and helped me to learn more and more, got me into crypto in general. I would love to share my story, Lava story, and where we're taking that.
Sure. So let's start with unfolding, give us a bit of context, because I mentioned the few ventures that you founded very successfully. What led you to Web3, to crypto, to founding Lava Network?
Yeah, so, I was always skeptical about Web3 in general. And I thought that, I've been next to a couple of revolutions. I was even next to Vitalik when he was an intern in eToro in Israel. I think it was 2014. But me, myself...
I didn't know that Vitalik was an intern in eToro.
You see, we're going to unveil more secrets now.
We're just 2 minutes in.
Perfect. So, he talked to me about smart contract, about code is low, about so many important principles. And I took from that one thing. The guy is brilliant, and I have zero understanding what he's speaking about. What brought me to crypto is actually when I was looking for my next big thing. I was doing a couple of startups, as you mentioned before, in different verticals, business intelligence, supermarkets, and I like to be in multi-vertical. But there was always something in crypto that was close to me, but I never jumped in. And together with my co-founder, Gil has a lot of very extensive knowledge in cybersecurity and reverse engineering, and we jumped into crypto. Started by doing MEV bots, NFT sniping. I was lucky actually to have a breakfast with a good friend, Danny Adlin, that founded Curve, and half a year before, Curve was sold to PayPal. So I really appreciate Dan and his journey in life. And when he told me, look, crypto is not fake anymore. It's something really, something that all the institutionals are in. I decided to take a closer look. And once I did that, I fell through the rabbit hole, right? It's a term also from crypto.
Definitely. When was it, just to give a bit of a context?
It was 1.5 years ago. It was the summer, right. NFT summer 21.
Yeah, definitely. The midst of it.
Yeah, I started watching actually an episode, a channel. It's called Finematics. And I think it's a very good channel explaining the engineering principles, and it just, it swallowed me in. This is how I actually initially came into crypto.
And from digging and falling into the rabbit hole, as we are often saying, what led you to founding Lava? From all the wide variety of, crypto and Web3 in general is a very broad term. What made you to come and came up with the idea of Lava?
So when you think about crypto, you think about the ledger, you think about multi-chain, you think about different networks that everyone independently operates as a silo. And once we were focusing on the MEV, we were focusing on bringing data from the blockchain and back to the blockchain. And we realized that there is an evolution in this, in the world of how do you get access to blockchain data. Because if you think about that, at the beginning, everyone was running their own nodes. So everyone has access to the blockchain. It was permissionless. It was reliable. It was with high integrity regarding the data because you were owning the data. But as blockchain adoption grew up, this was impractical to scale. Nobody wanted to run their own nodes. Nobody wanted to start supporting different chains. And then we noticed that the second evolution, the second era, we call it the Node 2 era of crypto came in. It was the centralized providers era. So think about amazing providers like Infura, Alchemy, Blockdaemon, QuickNode. All of them said something very simple. Don't run your own node. We're going to do it for you. We're going to bring the data for you. We're going to take care about how you're fetching data from the blockchain.
And if I'm trying to simplify and make it as simple as possible, why should someone should outsource it, I would say, I'll phrase it that way, and not running his own node?
Yeah, so you're right. Let me take a step back. If you want to read-write data from the blockchain, you need to run your own node. It's a silo. Every blockchain is a silo. It's a network of different ledgers maintaining the same state and communicating with themselves. So if you want to be part and build something, read data, you need to run your own node. But once it was impractical, the centralized provider found a solution. They lowered the barrier to entry for all the dApps to build on top of any blockchain. They just said, use us as a middleman to take data from the blockchain.
Mm-hmm. So if I'm trying to, again, in a few sentences, what Lava is all about for the audience that is listening and trying to grasp the whole idea of Lava Network?
For sure. So I gave the introduction of where we found the different eras and how was the evolution. So if we look at Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, we call it Node 1, Node 2, and Node 3. Node 1 was running your own node. Node 2 is a centralized provider coming and telling you, we're going to run it for you. Node 3, what we believe Lava is an accountability infrastructure, accountable infrastructure. It's the combination between running your own node and the scalability of the best centralized providers running the node for you. Think about Lava as the standard, a decentralized network of top-tier centralized providers. We are connecting, like Uber for nodes, we are connecting the dApps for their needs to the providers that bringing the data. But we do it with eliminating the problems that was in Node 2, which were privacy, censorship, and obviously scalability.
Yeah, sure, for sure. Yeah. I think the example with Uber is a good one, and obviously it depends on the context of who you're speaking and trying to explain it to. But another example that comes to my mind from a different world of apps, for instance, Iron Source is doing the same with ad networks for different ad networks. They're pretty much aggregating, and on top of that, they're selecting the best of the best performing ones, I would say. So it's kind of the same, but I guess it's nothing. It's not the same exactly, but you need to find a real world examples to compare them to, because I find it really easier, and it brings me way back for like more than a year ago that I interviewed Eli Ben Sasson and Nur Uri, the founders of Starkware, and all of their examples of what L2 is about and how they are solving scalability, all of their examples, and I learned a lot from that, is real world examples of getting a lot of different context and examples from different verticals in life and trying to compare and make it more sense for people. So
You're all about
definitely,
that, right? Because especially when we're developing technology, we want, obviously we're building a product, an open source for dApps. But at the same time, we aggregate a community, we aggregate a lot of advocates that want to understand what we do in one-liner. So that's exactly what you mentioned before. And I found this example of Uber, of us being kind of a market of connecting dApps to nodes, very straightforward.
definitely. And I want to just elaborate a bit more about the why should people go from the node 2 to node 3. So what was the real difficulty and problem with just going to one of the centralized providers that you mentioned?
One of the problems of Web 2 is centralization, right? You give few actors, you give a few enterprise the power of the data. And Web 3, you say, not your key, not your data, right? So we say in Lava, not your RPC, not your reliability, not the integrity of the data. You can think about Lava as an aggregator, right? Like example of the same way as you trade through 1inch, right? It routes the transaction to the best DEXs. But when you make a relay request through Lava, when you want to read data, when you want to write data, you will get service from the most relevant provider to you. Closest by the geolocation, provider that we already scored and historically rated higher according to the speed, the uptime, and data accuracy. So it's also reliable because you don't pick a provider like in a marketplace. You will be paired automatically if a providers go down to other provider that will obviously maintain 100% availability.
And the thing is, it does that automatically based on your specific needs.
Exactly. We are every user flagging the needs, configure that before, but we're building developer tools, a full system that will be very useful. Instead of the same dApp need to trust, run their own nodes, use centralized providers, and start benchmarking what is the up-to-date data. There is no consensus about that. Lava bringing the consensus in an open standard. So it's a real public good because any community, everyone from the community can build on top of that.
Yep. You mentioned privacy, censorship resistance, and scalability. Can you unfold a bit about especially privacy and censorship resistance? Because I think it's obviously scalability is a very important one, but I think especially the first two ones are less talked about and get covered, especially when it comes to RPCs and nodes in general.
Yeah, definitely. So when we were thinking about Lava, we felt that the infrastructure of $1 trillion industry, doesn't work and it doesn't make sense. Why do you have half a day of downtimes and you cannot access MetaMask? Why sometimes you have reliability issues? And one of the things that really pushed us in beginning of 2022, and we decided that we start a fundraising, and we found that the real need of Lava, the real vision, it's when we read Moxie's, the founder of Signal. He wrote an article about first impression of Web3. And he was exactly pointing out about this centralization problem, about the thing that he did a trick to OpenSea. And after they blocked him, he could not see the same NFT from his wallet, this NFT that he was creating. And this is exactly the censorship problem. And I'm recommending everyone to go read, if you didn't read, about the first impression of Web3 by Moxie. He describes they're amazing. And because one of the things that brought us to crypto is the fact that nobody can censor you, right? And we've seen the Tornado Cash problem in August when OFAC decided to censor them. So immediately all the other centralized providers obeyed.
Yeah,
But
just to give a bit of context about Tornado Cash, it was a DApp that basically removed or tried to mix the traces and of where the money and your funds came from, and it was the U.S. regulator, if I'm not mistaken, that
Right.
banned it. And they even arrested one of the main developers, the core developers of the Tornado. I'm not sure what's the status currently with him. I'm not sure if he is even released to this date. But anyways, go on. Wanted to give a bit of context for people.
definitely. So that's emphasizing the problem. If in some regions, that you need to have compliance, you need to have regulatory, obviously. But if in other regions you still want to use the service, you have the right to do that, and it depends on the region you are currently. So the same thing that happened with Moxie, the censorship problem. The Tornado Cash, it really brought us to be focusing on solving this problem. The same thing goes with privacy, because now you have the biggest wallets out there collecting personal data, collecting IPs, and you don't really know what they're doing with that. It's a bit reminding you what Google is doing with your data, why there's such a monopoly, why Facebook know exactly what you do with WhatsApp, and Facebook itself, Instagram, and then they're using this data to sell it to you. I have nothing against that. I have only a problem when they're using your data without your permission, or without letting you maybe get rewards from that also.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
what Web3 is all about. They're
exactly.
preaching the ownership of ownership of data. And now MetaMask, I think it was like a few months ago, they updated, as you've said, that they are tracking now and gathering IP addresses. And so you're saying that you're solving that solution by providing multiple options, basically, and not relying on specific one, correct?
Exactly.
Besides that, I wanna touch briefly on the main value prop, I would say, of actually what RPCs are doing. So basically, and if we are going back to what we mentioned and talked about first from real world examples, I think it's a pretty good, obviously it's different, but in terms of comparison and example, comparing that to an Oracle and saying, okay, Oracles are taking data off-chain and bringing them on-chain, RPCs are taking data on-chain and putting them on-chain, something like that. So if you can unfold that and explain it, I'm sure you'll do a better job than me.
RPC is the basic protocol, the basic communication protocol in Web3, in communication between different computers, in communication between someone who's outside a chain and wants to get information about the chain. You get the block height, the balance of a wallet. You have dozens and hundreds of different APIs, RPC APIs, that you can query and receive this information from a node. This is what RPC is about. Chainlink is an oracle that reaches a quorum about off-chain data and brings it on-chain. Okay, the difference, or let's say the similarity of Chainlink and Lava, that we are part of the same value chain for Web3 data infrastructure. An app can bring off-chain, on-chain using Chainlink. They're focusing about the data, but then they can use Lava to do more on-chain with that, for indexing, for caching or aggregating, checking what is the NFT's API and stuff like that.
So if I'm oversimplifying it, RPCs are more for on-chain data and Oracle's Chainlink is more for off-chain data.
The same way that Chainlink brings the data, the physical data, they need to use the infrastructure in order to store it, read it, and write it.
Got it.
This storing mechanism is the RPC protocol, and Chainlink is focusing on the off-chain to the on-chain data.
So basically, Lava is a decentralized data infrastructure, peer-to-peer marketplace. I know you don't like this term because obviously it doesn't fully explain what Lava Network is all about, as we covered few minutes ago.
Yeah.
But what would you say that the difference between the centralized marketplaces and how it's actually working? So you covered the fact that you're taking all of the current centralized providers, but what would you say besides that are the differences?
So I think, let's take an example, right? You are a DApp and you want to build on Ethereum. You're building something on Ethereum. You have, you have a DEX. You want to build a DEX. You wanna be an NFT marketplace.
Let's go with the DEX.
Let's go with the DEX. You need to store the data, read the data from Ethereum, do some manipulation, bring it back. Okay. We see the vision. We see the next step as you as a DApp using Lava as the go-to for the write read requests. Using Lava, you have a need for getting the balance, for example.
Yeah.
So once you have a need, you are coming to Lava on-chain, and you're asking, I need to use this API of Ethereum. At this moment, we're holding a list of top-tier centralized providers that's running nodes on Ethereum that have the data of Ethereum and that are at the same geolocation as you are. This pairing is being done on-chain on Lava. But following this pairing, you go off-chain to speak peer-to-peer with the providers. Once the transaction is over, once you finish all the communication, the consumer is signing the transaction, give it back to the provider. The provider is coming back to Lava in order to receive the rewards that he is supposed to get because of bringing the service. Mm-hmm. But this is, in this time that we have the transaction, we're collecting a lot of data about the availability, uptime, data accuracy, all of these features in order to score the performance of the provider. This score is being made for next time when we want to pair the provider with another DApp or something. Mm-hmm. This is how we kind of maintain equilibrium. We actually, if you think about that, we create an incentivized layer to incentivize honest behavior and amazing performance on the provider side. But dApps using this service know that first, the data is not being collected because the provider doesn't know where they came from, privacy, data reliability, because we're not only developing cryptographic proof to sign that the data is actually from the blockchain, but we are constantly sampling the data from other providers. So providers are holding accountability over the data itself. And this is the core differentiator to what we have now in what we call Node 2.
Yep.
I hope it makes
So you're basically for each time a DApp is participating and interacting with one of the providers, you're basically kind of giving a score, if I can say, to the provider, and then based on that score you can rank the best ones, and then later on you're providing better and better matches to new DApps that are coming.
Correct. Another thing that is important is that every provider has to stake Lava in order to participate. And it means that we hold them accountable for providing the best service. Because if they're not, they might be ranked lower, they might be jailed with the stake, and other enforcement that we can do once we have the stake.
Yeah, that's a good point. And one last thing that I want to touch, and you mentioned it a few times, and it falls back to the relevancy of the and what makes Lava Network different than just a marketplace, because it gives you an automated solution based on your the most relevant, I would say, solution for you. And you mentioned geography is one of the main factors. Can you explain to the non-technical people that are listening why the geolocation is important?
Yeah, basically, speed of light, communication, internet. You want to get the closest server to you in order, relay the data. In order
Makes
to
sense.
get the data.
You explained it. I think it's more than enough. But yeah.
But in general, just maybe 2 more sentences on that.
Sure.
When you adapt and you are located in East Europe, it doesn't make sense that Amazon or the cloud provider will give you data from Asia, right? So Lava is taking care of where the DApp is located geographically, and look for the list of nodes, list of providers that staking in the same geographic area. This is how we minimize the latency. This is how the overall performance will be much better.
We've talked when I introduced you about you being a multi-vertical entrepreneur, and Lava became a multi-chain, but you started off with Cosmos, if I'm not mistaken. Can you elaborate on why did you start with Cosmos as your, I would say, maybe MVP or maybe a bit more than the MVP? Why did you start with Cosmos and currently, obviously, you're offering multi-chain solutions, I would say. Yeah.
So, we have a lot of technical expertise, and for us, one of the first core principles was to find a home, find a place that we not inventing everything from scratch. We're building something on existing infrastructure, existing SDK community that can support us, that we can bring more. Elevate them, that we can bring our expertise to make it kind of a win-win situation. And when we were looking on that, we were looking on a couple of SDK consensus mechanism that we can use in order to build this app chain. Lava, it's an app chain. It's not just a dApp or a project or something. We really need to build it, to go deep and build infrastructure. And this is how we found Cosmos. We were We like what we see regarding the documentation, regarding the community, regarding the scalability. You see very strong project that were being built on Cosmos SDK. We're using Tendermint also. And this is how we found out our first station. We decided that our first step will be using Tendermint and Cosmos SDK. We chose the Cosmos stack because it's battle tested, because we've seen a lot of opportunities there, and we thought that the high customization of Cosmos will help us. Also, our first support was on Cosmos, obviously because of that. That's the go-to market. We are working with the project there. Some of us invested, gave grants. We're expanding there quickly because there was not go-to RPC provider there, and because of the Cosmos ecosystem on the other side is growing rapidly. You see a lot of amazing projects that coming now, such as Nobel, Nibiru. Probably I'm forgetting like another 10, but the second that we found out that RPC supply in Cosmos was very lacking, we decided that it should be a great deal, and we are super happy with our choice so far.
Definitely, seems like it. So you mentioned, if I'm trying to summarize, the first thing and maybe the most important one, there was the need. Obviously, you mentioned there was a lack in RPC. The second one is the Cosmos being very customizable, and in terms of the tech side of things, it was good enough it was good for you. And the third one is it's growing, and it has a growing community of developers that are building on top of it. And I guess these three were the reason that you started off with Cosmos.
Great summary, Nir. It feels like you were with me last year when we decided building Lava.
Trying to listen. That's what I'm trying. That's what I'm doing. So you started off with Cosmos. You obviously got your first few customers when you integrated Cosmos, or was it later on when you started implementing and integrating more chains?
Yeah, from the get-go, we were building already when we were on the private testnet. There were some projects that were working already with Lava on the Cosmos side, but from the get-go, we said we're going to support any EVM-based chain. Quickly after, for example, after meeting the founders of Aptos, immediately 1 week later, we had an integration. They were shocked about the speed of light that we were about to handle that, but that's thanks to the amazing, the best team I ever worked with in Lava. We are currently, 20. In general, we have 38 people, and in 26 engineers, top minds, and really people that can build the next infrastructure that will scale crypto. So we started with Cosmos projects there. But we never limited ourselves. So from the get-go, supporting Celo, Aptos, Polygon, Arbitrum, Starkware, and the list is long.
I asked about the point of starting with Cosmos and getting the first few customers, because I want to give a bit of context and maybe as an example for people to start and maybe think through the process of how you got to think about getting the few first customers. So if you can elaborate more about that and whether or not it was on Cosmos or not, but just to give people a bit more context and maybe some things to learn regarding acquiring and getting the first few customers, especially if it has a marketplace component to it, and constantly we are hearing the chicken and egg problem with marketplaces.
Yeah, so that's a very valid point. We believe from the beginning, because we are focusing on developers. Mm-hmm. We believe that the demand will push the supply. Once we are able to say the right things to the dApps, once we find partners that deeply believe it's a missing piece here, it's a missing piece that harming the scalability of Web3. And in general, I think that this so far makes us the engagement very high, because we are mentioning the right things. We're mentioning the fact that there is a single point of failure if you trust one party. There is a reliability issue, there is a privacy, and obviously there is a censorship problem. And because of that, once we were speaking with dApps, we heard all the problems, the same thing. I'm not talking even every second call. Every call, we heard about dApps running their own nodes. However, they don't want to do it, so they use also centralized providers. And they don't want to trust one centralized provider, so they're using couple. And that doesn't make sense. It's exactly as if at the beginning, like 10 years ago, you say, yeah, I'm using cloud, but I don't trust Azure, so I'm using also AWS and GCP, and back then it was IBM, and doesn't make sense, right? So we really believe that the demand going to drive the supply, and this is what we're focusing on.
So you pretty much identified even prior to meanwhile that you developed Lava, the strong need, and basically that's what drives everything, and it made everything so much easier. And I want to get to even step backwards to and maybe it seems to you now very obvious, I would say, but for first-time founders and for people that are trying to get the need, that product market fit that everyone is talking about, and you mentioned that you find it, and from there on it was pretty quick, because you mentioned that during all of the calls you found the same problems. I want to touch and hear your few tips and maybe common mistakes and few tips on how to identify these problems, and if I'm trying to be more specific, how to interview and how maybe not to interview potential customers when trying to get to the root cause of the problem.
So your question is more about
interviewing and identifying the core problems when you're interviewing potential customers.
You know, I was a few times in cycles of startups. It's never easy, right? It's never easy because until you get to the problem, you need to understand if you have the right window frame to develop that, enough resources to do it, and at the same time, make sure that the end customers wants to pay on that. Because everyone was telling you, yeah, it's a problem, yeah, but how much this problem is hurting you? How much you're paying because you don't have the solution? And I will quote one of the most successful entrepreneurs in Israel. He is always saying, Uri Levin, you know, he founded Waze. He said, don't fall in love in the solution, fall in love with the problem.
With the problem, yep.
I think this is the key. This is the key to how you make at least the first step of a startup successful. You identify a problem and you need to get as fast as you can to the product market fit. You need to make sure that users need your problem and willing to pay for that. Because if they don't willing to pay for that, it's nice to have, right? And another survey I read, where is where is this point that you reach a product market fit, just because you asked.
Sure.
So it's when you have a first, let's say, beta, you ask all the customers, you send them an email and you tell them, look, if tomorrow the product will cease to exist.
That's the guy there from Superhuman, the CEO.
Exactly. So you are two steps ahead of me.
No, but go ahead.
But you remember, he said that if tomorrow the product will cease to exist, you will have three options. How do you feel about that? You will be indifferent? Will you care? Or will you start sending emails and trying to do everything so the product didn't
remain alive?
And he said that if more than 33% said that they will make sure they want it to be alive, so you got the product market fit.
Yep, that's an interesting way. And by the way, it's the CEO, as I have mentioned, of Superhuman, and that was his way. That was his way of trying to measure that thing that's up until then, and maybe some would say still isn't quite easy to measure. So yeah, it's a good point. Let's progress, and okay, you find that product market fit. I want to touch on something that is maybe a bit more related to and for the first part of the podcast, we explained the technology, we explained RPC, we explained what Lava Network is all about, and I think it's a perfect example of a really sub-niche topic. Broadly speaking, most people didn't get what Web3 and crypto even is all about, and on the other side, we are seeing this whole technology just being more complex and more evolving, which is good. But on the other end, and my point is, how you're as a very complex technology, I would say, approaching to onboarding new people. You're focusing obviously more on the developer side and more on the technical side, but even then, the vast majority of people, even the developers, are not familiar with crypto and Web3 in general. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts and your approach on whether you're going to more Web3 native developers or the other way around. You're trying to onboard new people because they don't know. I think you got my point, but it's like two main audiences if I'm trying to overgeneralize. The one is Web3 native developers, and the other ones are just developers that want to come on board, and that's also a growing market. So what's your thoughts on that?
So as you mentioned before, I think I will combine this the two questions about how do you build the right marketplace and what's the strategy going forward. So when you think about that, our main principle is that Lava is permissionless. Like everyone can join. We don't stop anyone from becoming provider. We want the opposite. We want to make it easy to be a provider, like to install in a couple of minutes, join the network, and start being profitable, right? Starting to have rewards. So we reward the provider according to the quality of service, and we want them to find it profitable because they're investing their time, they're investing their resources. And as they constantly improving the service, the overall satisfaction on Lava is higher. The overall satisfaction from the different apps is much higher. So we partnering now with the top providers. So at the minute we have a strong foundation for the supply side, but at the same time we bring small and medium providers also to compete, also to provide services, because it's open for everyone. So I think that the way in general to speak with developers, and again, I'm not an expert, but we're constantly learning that, is community and branding. Because if you think about what messages you tell developers, what's the ethos they believe on, how good developer tools you're building for them to constantly come back, use more, obviously performance and latency and usability. So if we are successful in blending our expertise from Web 2 to Web 3, and that's why I fell in love in Web 3, is because the core protocol is open source. Everyone can join, everyone can start getting rewards, being part, and we amplify the developer experience with developing added value tools. So gateway, providers tool, indexing, rich APIs, and many more is just scratching the surface of what's in our roadmap.
Yep. I have so many more questions, but unfortunately we need to start wrapping up. So the end of each episode we have 5 questions in 5 minutes or less. So I guess we should start, because you're in it and we're the very end of it. I'll start off with the first one. Which book would you recommend yourself to read 10 years ago? If you met yourself 10 years ago today, which book would you recommend yourself to read?
One book that taught me the question I'm asking myself every morning is Talk Like Ted by Camin Gallo. I realized that as part of my journey as being as an entrepreneur is pitching the idea. And pitching,
for sure,
it can be 20 minutes. By the way, I'm going to do a teaser to those of you who didn't read the book. It's 18 minutes. That's the best time for presentation. But it can be 18 minutes, it can be 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 30 seconds, and elevator pitch, which is even less.
Podcast.
Or a 1 hour podcast, Camin Gallo would not recommend that, but leave it here. Yeah. We're talking about more presentation. It's Talk Like Ted.
I'm joking.
Talk Like Ted is it's a masterpiece, right? It's an art. To take an idea, to be a storyteller, and to make sure that the audience is following your line of thought, kind of anticipating what you're about to say, but then you say something different and keeping them more engaged. This is an art, okay? And I put a lot of emphasis for me to improve these skills. And I reckon everyone about this book. Last thing is that he asked a question there about the passion of people. And this is what I'm always asking people who I want to work with, who I want them to invest, customers. And I'm working with that every morning. It goes, what makes your heart sing? This is actually the passion.
Yep, love it. Can you share an anecdote about a risk that you took in the development of Lava that ultimately paid off and contributed to its success?
We're less than 1 year. So we took a lot of risk by growing the team in half a year to more than 30 people. It's a huge risk because you need to pick the right ones that are dynamic enough to work in a startup environment, to to build connection, to remove the ego, and sometimes says, okay, we need to deliver fast, so we might take shortcuts that theoretically that's not the best architecture to do. I don't have a specific example because I'm super happy about the team, and I think it's proving itself now, and the product is just 1 month out there in the market.
It. Yeah, definitely. As a successful founder, entrepreneur in the Web3 space and in general, a very important and less talked about subject topic is managing stress. What's the one advice that you will tell founders or entrepreneurs to try and maintain it and keep the balance?
First of all, thanks you for the compliment. I still don't feel a successful founder in Web3. We're just building, we're on the way, and I think we acknowledge a good trend, but it's a work in progress.
Definitely.
Always, yes. I think that in general, the way I look at stress is that I'm really thankful to have an amazing family background, education, and my mom will say always that she doesn't know how my father is so optimistic. I think that one of the most important things is delegate. Bring people you count on them. Bring people that can taking work A to Z, and it's one of the core principles of any employee in a startup, right? If you find these people, I think that they will reduce significantly your stress. And in general, I'm optimistic in life, and I like to do other activities, to enjoy the journey, and not to sleep a lot, that's for sure.
What advice, if we're talking about not sleeping a lot, so young entrepreneurs that are starting out, not sleeping a lot, what do you wish back then, if you can go back to Yair of 10, 15, 20 years ago, and wish you could say to him a few sentences, what would you say to Yair back then?
Don't sleep at all. No, I'm kidding. I think going more with the gut feeling, because sometimes, as everyone does, I chose wrong. And I heard there were some voices about choosing partners, about choosing investor, about choosing a direction even. That if I would just stop for a second, understand that this is an important junction. And in a junction, you can turn right and you can turn left. But if you turn right, you already did that. In the future, you will not be regret, oh, I turned right, why did I? No, you need to focus on the next junction. You need to put the energy on going forward, because just mourning about the past will not take you anywhere. So I think in general, listening more to the gut feeling, which is so strong sometimes, especially if it's shouting, don't underlook it. That's what I would say.
Where do you see Lava in 10 years from now?
I think in 5 years.
Okay. That's always the last question that I'm ending up with. And yeah, definitely. But it's still something that is fascinating to me to listen and hear more about the vision. But what I wanted to say is, all the founders that I'm interviewing and asking the same question, that listen, 10 years is way too much for me. 3, 5 tops. So let's summarize on 5 years from now.
I think in 10 years, Lava will be the standard. Lava will be the open source protocol that is super vibrant ecosystem in itself. It's super vibrant because we aggregate the best providers. We help the scalability of Web3, took it to the next phase, the next bull market where it should be. And we were one of the building blocks of this entire industry to go up, and building on top of that other tools, other APIs, other sophisticated application that eventually will get the Web3 or the Web5 to our day-to-day life. Yeah.
Amazing. Yair, thank you so much for your time, and all the links that we talked about, obviously Twitter, LinkedIn of Lava, and any other link that you want to share with us and help more people to find out about Lava. We'll share everything in the comments below. So again, thanks for you, and thanks for the audience that listened, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye.
Thank you, Nir.
Thanks.